The name's Bond. James Bond.
You know, former SAS types with easy smiles and expensive watches. Rolex.
Omega.
Beautiful.
Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. And today I am reviewing the Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean 39mm in blue. And I have to confess, I've been wanting to review this watch for over a year, but now thanks to Moya Jewelers, I'm able to get it in for review. So a big shout out to them. They are an authorized dealer for Omega and a whole bunch of other prestigious brands. In fact, I've actually sold them watches in the past. If you remember my ceramic Rolex Submariner, I actually sold it to them, so I can wholeheartedly recommend them as a customer myself. Now, I'll do a quick wristwatch check. I'm wearing the real, here goes the argument now, the real Bond watch. Fleming, of course, wore a 1016, the predecessor to this Explorer here. So I just thought, you know, as we're talking Bond, and I should really give a shout out to the Bond Experience for giving me these screen-used Casino Royale cards from the actual movie, which is just insanely cool. As you guys know, well, I've said it before, Mads Mikkelsen is one of my favorite actors, so fantastic. Shout out to David there. So why am I reviewing this particular Omega? Well, recently there's been a lot of requests for me to review the Tudor Black Bay, the 58 in the smaller size, and people tend to go straight to the Rolex or Tudor or the 300 Professional. This particular Planet Ocean is probably one of the most overlooked from Omega. So as always, to give it a bit of context, let's talk about heritage. Omega is certainly no stranger on the channel, and I have shared its long legacy many times. Founded in 1848, the Swiss luxury watchmaker is without a doubt one of the most illustrious and well-known brands of all time. When we think Omega, we automatically think of Speedmasters, the choice of NASA, and the first watch on the moon in 1969, among many other achievements, of course. But the Seamaster line is even more prestigious in some ways. It's the brand's longest continuously running line of watches and perfectly demonstrates the brand's evolution from traditional high-precision mechanical watchmaker to a luxury cultural icon. But before becoming the choice of James Bond in 1995 with Pierce Brosnan, Omega and the British military have been inextricably linked ever since the Royal Flying Corps used them in 1917 as their official timekeepers for their combat units, as did the US American Army, in fact, in 1918. But what is more astonishing and often overlooked when it comes to Omega is how they were already conquering the depths of the ocean decades before the first true luxury dive watches by Blancpain and subsequently Rolex. All the way back in 1932, Omega debuted its marine watch, which was worn by Yves Le Prayer, who many consider to be the father of modern diving. He was a French naval officer and inventor of the modern scuba mask and tank. First launched in 1948 to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of Omega, the Seamaster line was loosely based upon designs made for the British Royal Navy towards the end of World War II. In fact, a more refined caliber of the legendary manual wind 30 T2 in my Omega Spitfire pilot watch can be found in many of the early Seamasters, going by a different name, of course. By the end of the war, Omega had solidified its reputation for accuracy and reliability, and so much so that Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery personally visited the factory in Switzerland after the war. The first Omega Seamaster was a rather dressy-looking affair and modelled after the waterproof wristwatches made specifically and worn by the British military during the war. What distinguished the Seamaster from its diving watch predecessor was the O-ring gasket, which improved its water resistance. Omega turned to submarines used during the conflict for inspiration and included a resilient rubber gasket in the Seamaster's final design. This new case remained intact at depths up to 60 meters and temperature ranges between minus 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. Their engineers were so confident of the Seamaster's durability, they attached one to the outside of an aircraft and flew it over the North Pole in 1956. By the end of the 1950s, many brands, like those previously mentioned, and countless others for that matter, had started producing dive watches. Spurred on by the rise in recreational diving, it was time Omega got a piece of the action too. So, in 1957, this was perhaps one of Omega's influential years. The Seamaster 300 was born in their most iconic trio, alongside the Speedy and, of course, the Railmaster. The Seamaster 300 would go on to be issued once again to the British Ministry of Defence and worn by famed oceanographer Jacques Cousteau's team during their 1963 Conshelf 2 experiments in the Red Sea. With the success of the Seamaster, the range then expanded rapidly over the following decades with a whole host of record-breaking and innovative dive watches throughout the 1960s and 70s. Like the helium-proof Plo Prof, designed to meet the needs of ultra-deep saturation diving, and a direct response to Rolex developing the first automatic helium escape valve. So when it came to succeed the iconic Seamaster of the 1990s, the Seamaster Planet Ocean was introduced in 2005 as a large diving watch to ensure water resistance down to 2,000 feet or 600 meters. This evolution then culminated in 2011 with models like the one we're looking at today, which for the first time featured a master chronometer rated movement. As always, let's go over the dimensions first. We have a diameter actually about 40 millimeters. The case does jut out slightly, whereas the bezel itself is actually 39, so it's more like a 40 millimeter watch. We got a thickness of 14 millimeters. A lug to lug, we're looking at 45 millimeters, and then a lug width of 19 millimeters. The weight is a staggering 190 grams, which I'll get into why in just a moment, but in terms of material, it's stainless steel and features a domed, scratch-resistant sapphire crystal with anti-reflective treatment on both sides. Now, the bezel insert is quite interesting. It's what they call liquid metal, and it's actually an exclusive technology to Omega. They bought the rights to it. And to give you an example, steel alloys ordinarily used for watches have a hardness of between 200 and 240 Vickers, but liquid metal is harder at 600 Vickers. The ceramic used for the bezel is even harder at 1,200 Vickers. So after the liquid metal has been pressed into the notches, any excess alloy can be scraped away without affecting the ceramic. Omega's combination of ceramic and liquid metal results in this very, very hard and finely crafted dive time bezel there. And I love how the grey area is kind of a little bit understated, metallic looking, and has a very nice, pleasing, glossy look to it. We have the triple arrow handset, giving very clear legibility. The broad arrow hands are also faceted. The bezel itself is 120 click, very, very solid feeling, and of course, as you would expect, unidirectional. There's outstanding orientation thanks to the superluminova and the differing sized markers. A really nice subtle touch is how they've made the minute hand glow a different color, again to differentiate. At the 10 o'clock is the instantly recognizable helium escape valve, marked like all modern Seamasters with the periodic table logo for helium there, and the standard Omega Greek alphabet logo on the screw down crown there. Now if we turn it over, you'll see This very impressive caliber indeed. This is the 8800. It's a reworked version of the existing 8520, which was used in the second generation of 37.5mm Planet Oceans. It features a barrel that enables the power reserve to a very handy 55 hours, which is great if you wear this as your, weekly Monday to Friday watch, and then strap something else for the weekend, although this is a great sports watch for the weekend. And as you would expect, there's quick set function, hacking, manual wind, so on and so forth. Each movement is tested according to the Master Chronometer certification process, which is approved by the highly respectable METAS, which is Omega's own super elite higher standard, and it covers 8 tests. And this movement includes resistance to magnetic fields reaching up to 15,000 gauss, which again makes it absolutely fantastic, especially if you work in some kind of recording studio or a cockpit of a plane or anything where there's a lot of electronic equipment, which is, well, let's be honest, most places these days. It has a free sprung balance with a silicon balance spring, rhodium plated finish with the Geneva waves and a stunning arabesque pattern that really emphasizes that sense of movement. It beats at 25,200 vibrations an hour and has 35 joules. This rather unusual frequency is to optimize the accuracy over a longer period of time. And speaking of which, naturally, we have to mention it does feature the coaxial escapement, which Omega acquired from the revered British horologist George Daniels. It was the first new practical and revolutionary escapement in over 250 years, with less friction via the lateral and direct impulses, and therefore requires less lubrication and servicing over time. And if we just move the rotor to the bottom there, you'll just see at the top there, I'm not sure if this will focus, there's a lot of reflection there, but yeah, you can see the barrels of the movement are DLC coated inside to reduce friction and increase service intervals. The balance spring uses a silicon technology. This is introduced to the later Planet Oceans, the SI-14, and has the purpose to make it even more anti-magnetic. The staff and pivots are also made of what's called Niver gauze and an anti-shock system called Niverchock, which is made from a special amorphous material. And lastly, we must mention the bracelet. It's entirely brushed there. Screwed links, solid end links, of course. Quite an impressive clasp, kind of their answer to Rolex's glide lock system. You see the little push button there, and you can adjust it on the fly, which is great for, in the summertime with the heat expanding your wrist, or if you want to slide it over a diving suit, which is of course what it was originally intended to. Signed, beautiful little double push button clasp there, extremely solid. The design and style is very much inspired by the 1957. Just look at the curvaceous case with those extremely wide beveled edges and super sharp transitions from high polish to that lovely brush. And I love the amount of detail they've gone in for. Look at in between the cog. Very ergonomic, I have to say, the cog edge of the bezel. It's sandblasted again on the crowns. It's a lot more intricately finished than your Submariner or your Tudor for that matter. And I love the broad arrow hands. It really evokes the classic 1957, much more actually vintage in style than the Brosnan era Seamaster, with of course that semi-skeletonized hand, which was a bit of a contention for some. Something I really do adore is the little nod to the 300-meter professional with the scalloped edge of the case back. Not noticeable at first, but a clever little design trait. The extra refinement extends to the dial. We see very pronounced Arabic numerals paying homage to the very first Seamasters. Some of them had beautiful applied Arabics, although obviously not in so much of a modern style and lettering. The colors are quite rich. I would say it's a Persian deep blue that does change to a kind of Prussian blue at times, and with small flashes of orange, which I think complement and contrast nicely. The rest being in a grey print, echoing the lettering and a ton of hash marks actually on the inside of that bezel. If you saw my previous Omega video talking about Doxa, you'll know why diving companies choose orange, and it's a very cool little detail indeed. Something that is utterly unique is the slightly asymmetrical case. It does have the benefit of protecting the crown pretty effectively without having the need for crown guards. So what's the difference between this and the reference 29005091 that appeared in the 2006 Casino Royale movie? Well, in 2011, the Planet Ocean underwent major aesthetic upgrades, the finishing, the adding of the indices, hands and bezel, including many technical improvements like the addition of the transparent case back, bezel inserts, and the upgrades in caliber, which are now completely in-house and assembled by Omega, and even an enlargement of the coaxial escapement, making it 13% larger in order to reduce friction. And they were actually tested and simulated in 10 years of use, and they've proved to be extremely reliable, as was the bidirectional winding rotor, which was altered to make it inaudible. The Niverox Anchoron balance spring was added, as was zircon oxide rotor pivots and the shock absorbers, balance springs that we mentioned earlier. So let's address the positives. Well, first of all, it's a great size. It feels incredibly hefty. If 40mm is the new 42mm, then this 39 is the new 40. And to be honest, I don't know why they say it's 39mm, because actually it's a 40mm. And it is a true any situation watch. I mean, it's built like an absolute tank, yet elegant enough to wear formally. And that is what you want in a James Bond diver watch, after all. And you do get that Bondian feeling, the link to the past via its design. And of course, the great history of the Seamaster name. Very few brands come close to rivaling this amount of prestige and achievements. It's also extremely versatile. It's a true strap monster, although we'll talk a little bit about that in the negatives. I think it looks great on rubber straps, on NATOs, on leather, pretty much anything. And the black variation is even more so. But at the end of the day, its main strength has to be its performance in every single way. Beyond Cosc accuracy, an insane 600-meter water resistance, which, you know, at one time we got to remember it was cutting edge. I mean, you could literally take this saturation diving to rescue a sunk nuclear warhead, and then off to the opera the same night to assassinate a Spectre agent. This watch has got you covered. And also, I have to say, this is true luxury. The quality, the exquisite finishing, the attention to detail is just absolutely outstanding. So what about negatives? Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of bracelets that don't taper. I feel it is a bit heavy. It's a staggering amount of weight for a watch that's not actually that big. Also, it's quite thick. It's a tubby one. Now, this might actually please some people because it does have a tremendous presence, but I like something a little bit more refined to slip under the cuff. This is not going to do that as easily, but it is forgivable considering you have to house this larger movement and of course the insane water resistance. But personally, I would be happy to sacrifice it a little bit to, let's say, 12mm, perhaps sacrificing the display back just to make it a little bit more cuff friendly. Some might actually like the reassuring feeling. In fact, if you look very carefully in the movie Casino Royale, and as pointed out by an excellent video by a channel called The Bond Armory, James Bond actually uses his watch as a a rudimentary knuckle duster in true Fleming fashion, just like Fleming once wrote in his books. Would I do that with an SKX or my vintage Tudor sub? Probably not, but I wouldn't think twice with this because it's just so damn strong feeling, you know, and with all that super high-end tech inside, you don't really have to worry about it. However, my biggest negative has to be the 19mm lug width. It's just so annoying to find straps for, although you can just squeeze in a 20mm or make do with the gap on an 18. Why watch brands still insist on doing this, I just don't understand, but it's not the end of the world, so it's really not that serious. And lastly, I'd love to see a no-date version. With the 3 numeral there, it would have a tremendous elegant symmetry, but although, you know, most people prefer the date, it is a useful complication. But again, this is just my preference and personal taste. So in conclusion, I really do feel it's one of the most capable, almost perfect dive watches, certainly in its class. I think Omega set out to make the best watch they could, and no expense was spared. And with the Tudor 58 being hard to find and Rolex entering absolutely absurd prices, this is in many ways the best alternative. It's actually, well, this is my opinion, but it's more faithful to the style of the vintage classics in some ways than the modern Tudors are. Certainly when it comes to aesthetics, it's clearly taken on the design language very, very well, although, you know, in a modern context. And yet with these specifications and performance, it is absolutely the pinnacle of what Omega has to offer in a very realistic and trendy size, yet still managing to retain some of that masculinity. In my opinion, this is the overlooked sweet spot in the Omega range, and I have a little inkling that it's been so overlooked that it might be discontinued or replaced, and thus it definitely will help to maintain its value. It's also a true digital sports watch with a heritage that is intrinsically linked to the human exploration of marine environments, the British military, and of course pop cultural cinematic icons. But beyond all that, at a fundamental level, it really does deliver an unwavering performance. It's not just attractive. So yeah, capo lavoro from Omega here. Absolute pure class. What can I say? Anyway, so I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think of this particular Planet Ocean. A massive thank you to Moyers again for lending this in. I've had such fun with it. I'll leave all the links down below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. Oh, and don't forget to check out the new merchandising store, the Instagram, the Facebook group, all the rest of it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.